The Star Wars galaxy goes back over 25,000 years. During that time, certain events stand apart from normal battles and wars because they change the galaxy in ways that could never be fixed. Some of these disasters are well known from the films, while others come from novels, games, and comics that most fans have never seen. However, all of them left damage that lasted for generations. Here are the 12 worst disasters in Star Wars history. Jedha held no military value, but it carried spiritual meaning for the entire galaxy. In the film Rogue One, the city was tied to ancient Force traditions and held kyber crystal sites older than the Jedi Order itself. For thousands of years, pilgrims from hundreds of worlds visited Jedha to learn that the Force belonged to everyone, not just Jedi or Sith. Then the Death Star test changed everything. Director Krennic ordered the station to fire at low power because the Empire wanted proof that kyber-powered weapons worked at a large scale. The city was gone. The planet survived, but millions did not. In an instant, the blast damaged the air and caused huge harm across the region. Ancient temples vanished, and records holding centuries of Force knowledge disappeared in seconds. As a result, this event proved the Death Star worked. The weapon could be set to wipe out a city or an entire planet, and fear spread across the galaxy even before the official word came out. However, this was only the beginning. The next target proved the Empire would give up even its own property to stay in control. The Battle of Scarif was a fight where both sides lost everything they brought. In Rogue One, Scarif served as the Empire's main data storage base and held the most secret Imperial records, including the Death Star plans. A huge shield gate protected the world from orbit, making ground attacks impossible without first winning the control of space. Despite these odds, the Rebel Alliance attacked anyway. They sent their entire strike force with no escape plan because everyone understood the risks. Their goal was simple but desperate: send the Death Star plans off-world before Imperial backup arrived. Rebels fought on the beaches of Scarif to buy time for a single data transfer that could change the war. Against all odds, they succeeded. The plans reached the Rebel fleet moments before the Death Star arrived. Then, the Empire wiped out everything. The film shows a single blast clearing the entire surface base. Rather than let the Rebels keep what they had found, the Empire gave up its own records, its own workers, and the Rebel ground forces all at once. This victory came at a huge cost for both sides. The Death Star plans let the Rebels find a weakness in the battle station, leading to its end at Yavin. At the same time, the Rebel Alliance lost skilled fighters, trained pilots, and resources that it can never replace. In the end, the rebellion came out weaker in numbers, but armed with proof that the Empire would give up anything to hold power. But worse was still to come. The next event showed the Empire would wipe out entire worlds without pause. Alderaan chose peace and paid the ultimate price for it. In the film A New Hope, the planet had no shields and no military. Its people lived in open cities on a defenseless world. For centuries, this choice had made Alderaan strong as a center of culture, art, and learning because it posed no threat to anyone. Then the Death Star fired at full power. The planet broke apart completely. In the film, Alderaan is shown coming apart from the inside out. The surface cracked, the core blew up, and within seconds, the entire world became a field of broken pieces. Billions of lives ended at once with no warning and no chance to escape. This attack came just days after the Empire had shut down the Imperial Senate. With Alderaan gone and the Senate closed, the message was clear. The Empire no longer needed to pretend that it served the people, and fear would replace cooperation as the basis of Imperial rule. Grand Moff Tarkin believed wiping out one world would scare thousands into giving up. Fear did spread, and neutral systems understood the threat. However, terror also creates resistance. Systems that might have stayed neutral now faced only two choices: give in completely or fight back. Many chose to fight, and the Rebel Alliance grew stronger after Alderaan rather than weaker. Officers left the Empire and joined the Rebels, while resources flowed in from systems that had never supported the rebellion before. To this day, Later, canon sources confirm that Alderaan's broken pieces remain visible as a lasting reminder that some choices cannot be undone. Yet, Alderaan was not the first great loss that the galaxy had faced. Years before Alderaan, a different kind of loss had already reshaped the galaxy. The Jedi Order had protected the galaxy for over 1,000 generations and was wiped out in a single day. Both Revenge of the Sith and the Clone Wars show that the Order numbered in the thousands and had served as peacekeepers of the Galactic Republic. They kept temples across many worlds and saved knowledge of the Force going back to the earliest written records. Then, Order 66 ended all of it. Across the galaxy, clone soldiers turned on their Jedi commanders at the exact same moment. This betrayal was especially hard because the Jedi had trusted the clone army completely after fighting together for years. Jedi Masters knew individual clones by name and had shared victories, losses, and countless battles together. Yet the series reveals that the clones had no choice in what happened. Control chips placed in them during their creation forced them to obey when the Order came. The Jedi did not know about the chips. They only saw soldiers they had trusted turning weapons against them without warning and without mercy. As a result, within hours, Jedi Masters were gone on distant battlefields, and Council members were overwhelmed in the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. The few Jedi who survived did so through luck, quick thinking, or the help of clones who managed to resist their programming. The losses went far beyond the immediate count. Beyond the immediate losses, the Jedi Order lost everything it had built over thousands of years. Training centers were seized or shut down, and records holding gathered wisdom came under Sith control. Holocrons, special devices holding the recorded teachings of past Jedi Masters, were taken or broken. Making matters worse, canon sources including Rebels and Obi-Wan Kenobi show that children born with Force abilities faced a terrible fate in the years that followed. Imperial Inquisitors hunted them across the galaxy. Those who escaped grew up hiding their gifts because they were afraid to use abilities they did not understand. With no Jedi to oppose them, Palpatine and Vader controlled how the entire galaxy understood the Force. The light side became a myth, while the dark side became the only known path to power. This situation lasted for nearly 2 decades. Even so, the galaxy's suffering was not over. When Palpatine finally fell, he made sure the galaxy would suffer one more time. Both the Shattered Empire comic series and the game Battlefront 2 confirmed that Palpatine planned for his own end, but did not try to prevent it. Instead, he made sure the galaxy would be punished for allowing it to happen. Once word of the Emperor's end reached the Imperial Command, Operation Cinder started on its own. There was no review, no discussion, and no chance to reconsider. The plan Palpatine had prepared years in advance simply began. The targets were not rebel bases or enemy worlds, but rather loyal Imperial planets. Planets that had supported the Empire faithfully for decades suddenly found themselves marked for harm. According to canon sources, weather control satellites deployed across these worlds, creating huge storms, terrible flooding, and widespread crop failures. Unlike the Death Star, the harm happened slowly over days rather than seconds. People watched the storms approach and understood what was happening, but they had no way to stop it. The purpose was punishment rather than military gain. As a result, Operation Cinder ended whatever trust remained in the Empire. Worlds that had been loyal watched Imperial forces attack Imperial citizens. The message was impossible to ignore. The Empire had never protected its own, and it never would. Because of this, no stable Imperial government could follow Palpatine. Officers found themselves commanding forces that had just attacked loyal populations, and the political center fell apart completely. Canon sources confirm that Operation Cinder served no military purpose at all. It gained no territory, defeated no enemies, and reached no military goal. It existed only to cause suffering as Palpatine's final act. In time, the galaxy began to heal. The New Republic eventually rose from the chaos, but decades later, history repeated itself. The New Republic was erased before it even knew it was under attack. The Force Awakens reveals that the New Republic chose to rotate its capital between member worlds to prevent any single planet from gaining too much power. Different systems took turns hosting the government. When the First Order fired at Starkiller Base, the Hosnian system held the rotating capital. The timing was on purpose because the First Order had waited for exactly this moment. The weapon fired through hyperspace, which meant that there was no approaching threat that sensors could detect. There was no warning of any kind, and the beam arrived in the Hosnian system before anyone knew to be afraid. An entire star system was gone in seconds. In seconds, multiple planets vanished at once, and the Republic fleet stationed in the system was lost completely. The Senate building was erased, along with everyone inside. Every elected leader, every government worker, and every record was gone. Military command failed right away as officers in distant systems waited for orders that would never come because no one remained to give them. This event ended more than lives and buildings. It ended the government itself. When Alderaan was gone decades earlier, the Imperial Senate still existed briefly, and some structure remained. In contrast, the Hosnian loss left nothing at all. There was no backup capital waiting and no plan for what came next. The New Republic's ability to respond as a unified government ended completely in those few seconds. In the aftermath, the First Order rose without real opposition. Individual systems faced the same choice their grandparents had faced: give in to the new threat or try to resist alone. Most gave in, while the few who resisted became the base of the resistance. The Force Awakens confirms that a full generation had passed since the original Death Star's end. The galaxy had rebuilt, and peace had seemed secure. Then another superweapon erased another peaceful system, and the galaxy proved just as unprepared as before. This was not the first time hope had been destroyed in this way. Centuries before these events, another symbol of hope had fallen during the High Republic era. Starlight Beacon represented everything the Republic hoped to become. In the High Republic novels and comics, the station served as a huge relief hub, sending aid to worlds in crisis. It stood as a symbol of what the Jedi and the Republic could do together, floating at the edge of known space as a sign of hope on the frontier. Nihil understood exactly what ending Starlight Beacon would mean. They used the chaos of hyperspace problems to sneak into the station, then brought it down while the entire galaxy watched. As a result, Jedi and Republic workers lost their lives, resources and ships were lost, and peace efforts that had taken years to build fell apart overnight. At the same time, the mental damage proved even greater than the physical losses. High Republic sources show that faith in growth fell apart across the frontier. Worlds that had seemed safe realized that safety had been a lie, and systems began to question whether Republic presence made them targets rather than partners. Jedi trust suffered as well because the Order had shown Starlight Beacon as proof of their commitment to peace and service. Its end suggested that the Jedi could not protect even their most visible project. This event marked a turning point in High Republic history. Before Starlight, the era was defined by growth and hope for the future. After Starlight, fear and defensive thinking took over. The Nihil had ended belief in what the Republic stood for. Remarkably, the Nihil were not even the worst danger of this age. The Nihil were not the first threat to come from hyperspace during this era. The Great Hyperspace Disaster made the entire galaxy question whether faster-than-light travel was safe. According to the High Republic novel Light of the Jedi, hyperspace travel had worked safely for thousands of years. Ships entered hyperspace, traveled faster than light, and came out at their destinations without trouble. The technology was understood. The routes were mapped, and everyone trusted that the system worked. Then the Great Hyperspace Disaster ended that trust completely. It began when a large transport vessel called the Legacy Run was lost while traveling through hyperspace. Normally, the loss of a ship in hyperspace would be a contained tragedy. However, when the Legacy Run broke apart, something never seen before happened. Pieces of the lost ship came out of hyperspace at extreme speed, and became weapons no one could predict or stop. The novel describes these events as emergences. Broken parts appeared without warning across a vast region of space at near light speed. They could not be tracked before they arrived or stopped once they appeared. Whatever they hit was gone right away. Soon after, planets were hit without warning while space stations were lost. Trade routes that had operated safely for centuries became deadly dangerous. No one knew where the next emergence would occur or when, because the broken parts could appear anywhere along the path that the Legacy run had traveled. For the first time in recorded history, the galaxy questioned whether hyperspace itself was safe. Because of this, trade routes were left empty, and business between systems slowed down badly. Worlds that depended on space shipping found themselves cut off from supplies that they needed. The vast network of hyperspace lanes that made galactic life possible suddenly seemed weak and unreliable. What made this disaster especially frightening was that it was not a weapon. No enemy had planned it, and no villain had meant for it to happen. A weapon can be found and ended, and an enemy can be spotted and defeated. An accident, on the other hand, can happen again at any time without warning, without cause, and without any way to prevent it. High Republic sources confirm this disaster prove that systems the entire galaxy depended upon could fail badly without any warning at all. Now, the remaining entries come from legend stories, and the first shows that weapons built to end wars can become the war's greatest crime. The mass shadow generator ended the Mandalorian Wars by destroying both sides at once. In the game Knights of the Old Republic 2, the weapon was designed to end a conflict that had dragged on for years. By that point, Republic forces had suffered defeat after defeat, and world after world had fallen to Mandalorian conquest. Republic leadership was desperate for any advantage, and the weapon at Malachor 5 promised to end the war in a single battle. The mass shadow generator controlled gravity on a planetary scale. When turned on, it would create gravity forces strong enough to crush anything in range. Ships, soldiers, vehicles, and buildings would all be gone because nothing could survive what the weapon would create. Then Republic Command turned on the weapon during the peak of battle, when both the Mandalorian and Republic fleets filled the space above Malachor 5 while both armies covered the surface below. The trap was set. When the weapon activated, there was no way to escape. The game depicts ships collapsing in orbit as gravity grew beyond any survivable level. Entire fleets crumpled with their hulls crushed like thin metal. On the surface, both armies were pressed into the ground. Mandalorians and Republic soldiers alike were gone together. Their battle ended in shared loss. The Mandalorian Wars ended with that battle, and the Mandalorian threat was broken. However, victory meant nothing to those who had fallen, and those who survived found that survival carried its own cost. Those who lived through Malachor 5 carried deep wounds that never healed. In the years that followed, survivors went through heavy mental pain after witnessing warfare without limits. Victory had required the Republic to lose its own forces along with the enemy, and many survivors could not accept what they had been part of. Some turned to the dark side, seeking power to ensure they would never be so helpless again, while others simply broke under the weight of what they had seen. Legend sources often name Malachor 5 as proof that total war makes victory meaningless. The Republic won the battle and the war. But the Republic that came out was not the same group that had entered the conflict. In the same way, the Jedi who survived were not the same Jedi who had once sworn to protect all life. As terrible as this was, another weapon caused even stranger damage. The mass shadow generator turned gravity into a weapon. The next disaster turned the Force itself into a weapon. The Thought Bomb was unlike any other weapon ever created. As described in the Darth Bane novel trilogy, the Sith created this weapon to turn the Force into a tool of harm. The goal was not to channel the Force or direct it towards a target, but rather to make the energy that connected all living things into a bomb. To create this weapon required huge amounts of dark side power. Multiple Sith Lords had to channel their hatred and rage together while feeding the bomb until it reached full power. When finally set off, The thought bomb would end every Force-sensitive being within its range. The weapon made no difference between Sith and Jedi. It would take both equally. According to the trilogy, the blast erased everyone present who could touch the Force. Sith Lords who had spent decades gathering power vanished alongside the Jedi who would come to stop them. Centuries of learning, training, and tradition disappeared in a single moment. When the blast ended, the battlefield fell completely silent. That silence was not peace because the thought bomb had left damage that would not heal. The blast site remained wounded for generations. In the aftermath, legend sources describe a scar in the Force staying at the spot where the thought bomb had gone off. Force users who came near the site felt pain, confusion, and darkness pressing against their minds because the bomb had damaged reality itself by creating a wound that refused to close. After the event, knowledge of the thought bomb method was hidden on purpose. Sith who survived the era refused to teach it to their students, and Jedi who learned of its existence worked to ensure the information was lost. For perhaps the only time in history, both sides of the Force agreed completely that some weapons should never be used again. Yet even this was not the worst thing ever done to the Force. The thought bomb damaged the Force in one spot. The next disaster erased the Force from an entire world. Nathema is the only world in the galaxy where the Force was completely erased from existence. The Old Republic game and related materials depict Nathema as once a living world with cities, nature, and millions of beings. The Force flowed through it just as it flowed through every other world in the galaxy. Then, the Sith Emperor performed his ritual. This ritual required sacrifice on a scale never tried before or since. The Sith Emperor gathered his followers and drew upon their power while channeling everything they had towards a single goal, his own continued life. However, the ritual demanded far more than his followers could provide. It demanded everything on the planet. The ritual drained all life and all Force presence at the same time. According to legend sources, every living thing on Nathema was emptied. Plants, animals, and people were all consumed. The Force itself was stripped completely away, leaving an empty space where energy should have existed. As a result, Nathema became a place where the Force simply did not exist. Force users who came near the planet grew weak. In the game, the closer a Force user came to Nathema, the more their connection to the Force faded and failed. On the surface, that connection vanished entirely. Jedi and Sith alike became ordinary beings unable to touch the power that had defined their entire lives. Even now, the planet cannot recover from what had been done. Life cannot return because seeds planted in the soil will not grow, and animals brought to the surface cannot survive. The conditions required for life had been permanently consumed. To this day, legend sources confirm that even other Sith viewed Nathema as wrong on a deep level. The planet had not ended in any normal sense. It had been unmade, and life itself had been erased from that world. All of these disasters were terrible, but none of them compare to what comes next. Every disaster on this list caused millions or billions of losses. The final entry caused trillions. The Yuuzhan Vong War was fought against an enemy the galaxy had never seen before. As told in the new Jedi Order novel series, the Yuuzhan Vong were a species from outside the known galaxy with technology, biology, and beliefs unlike anything ever seen. Their ships were grown from living tissue rather than built from metal. Their weapons were creatures bred for war rather than machines. Their culture worshipped pain and sacrifice in ways that made peaceful talks impossible. Most importantly, the series makes clear that the Yuuzhan Vong were completely invisible to the Force. Jedi could not sense them coming, could not predict their movements, and could not read their intentions. The abilities that had made Jedi effective for thousands of generations offered nothing against this enemy. For the first time in recorded history, the Force could not help. The war lasted for years, and total losses reached into the trillions. In fact, legend sources confirm the scale of harm went beyond anything ever seen in all of recorded history. Entire worlds were consumed by the invasion, while populations numbering in the billions were lost. Cities that had stood for ages became rubble, shipyards, space stations, and communication systems were targeted and ended one by one. Even worse, planets that resisted the Yuuzhan Vong were not simply conquered. According to the series, these worlds were changed into something alien as native life was consumed, while strange structures grew from living material that had once been buildings and cities. Galactic governments collapsed and reformed multiple times during the war. As a result, the New Republic fell because its government could not put together the response that an invasion of this scale required. Replacement governments rose to take its place and tried to organize resistance, but they eventually fell as well. Alliances formed between former enemies, broke apart under the pressure of constant defeat, and reformed in new ways. Nothing remained stable because stability was impossible. At the same time, legend sources describe the Yuuzhan Vong adapting to every plan developed against them. When resistance grew strong in one area, they simply attacked somewhere else. The war ground forward year after year, consuming resources and ending populations. Entire generations grew up knowing nothing except war. During this time, children were born after the invasion had already begun, and they learned about loss before they understood what peace meant. Fear was a constant companion throughout their childhoods. By the time the war finally ended, these children had become adults who carried the conflict inside them. They could not picture a galaxy without enemies because they had never known one. The series confirms this war stands as the single greatest lasting disaster in all of galactic history. The effects lasted long after the fighting stopped. In the end, survivors carried memories of loss that shaped every decision they made afterward. Trust between peoples and governments became difficult. Groups that rebuilt after the war did so around the idea that another invasion could come at any time. The galaxy that came out of the Yuuzhan Vong War was harder, more watchful, and more heavily armed than the galaxy that had existed before. No other event in canon or legends comes close to this level of destruction. The Yuuzhan Vong War stands alone as the moment when the galaxy came closest to complete end and barely survived. From these tragedies, a clear pattern emerges. The galaxy does not fall because of villains alone, but because multiple systems fail at once. Trust breaks down, key systems collapse, and belief in shared values shatters. Yet the Star Wars galaxy endures. Empires rise and eventually fall, while republics collapse and later reform. The Jedi vanish and then return. Through every disaster, some thread of life survives, and some base remains upon which the next generation can rebuild. However, lasting is not the same as healing, and survival is not the same as getting back what was lost. The galaxy that exists after a disaster is never quite the same as the galaxy that existed before. These 12 events left marks that time alone could not erase. If you want to learn more about the dark side that caused many of these disasters, we have a video explaining the ranks and structure of the Sith Order from the lowest acolytes to the most powerful Dark Lords. Or if you want something longer to relax with, we have over 2 hours of Star Wars theories, perfect for winding down at the end of the day.